let's move on to my list. My list of the top 10 best plane movies of all time. I'm doing this in honor of Flight Risk, which just came out. Mel Gibson's Flight Risk. Mad Mel Gibson's plane movie starring Mark Wahlberg with not a bald cap. That's just the way he chose to shave his head. Not a good movie. Not a good movie. Certainly not a good plane movie, despite it taking place on a plane. However, there have been a lot of great plane movies over the years, over the decades. And while I have not seen all of them, I have seen quite a few plane movies and some fantastic ones. Some that are like really awesome action movies, some that are comedies, and some that are kind of like dramas as well. It's an interesting subgenre. It's a great setting for a movie to take place in or on in this case. And there's a lot you can do with it. And it was also great because we watched a number of wonderful plane movies last week for our watch party. Some which might actually appear on this list, but it's a really underrated little subgenre in the action genre. And yes, some people have brought up some other plane movies before, like Passenger 57. I have not seen that movie. I've not seen it all the way through, so it didn't make the list. I'm sure there'll be plenty of other films that it was like, what about this movie? What about that movie? Is this a plane? Is that a plane? Is a boat plane a plane? It is a plane, but I don't know if I've seen every single plane movie, but I have seen quite a few. So let's go ahead and jump into it. At number 10, which I'm sure won't be controversial at all, that I've placed it at number 10. But at number 10, I have Top Gun, directed and produced by Tony Scott, inspired by an article titled Top Guns, which focused on these American jet fighter pilots and the Top Gun Academy, which trains all these jet fighters. Of course, it's kind of like an essential 80s movie. You have Tom Cruise playing this hot shot, pilot, this lieutenant, Pete Mitchell Maverick, who's this like young naval aviator on board this aircraft carrier. Funny enough, the USS Enterprise, right? Well, he's just too much to handle, and they're like, all right, you got to go to the Top Gun Academy. You're going to go there. All right, we're going to send you back there because you're just too much goddamn trouble. And he meets up with like all these other people, these other kind of hotshot jet fighter pilots, along with his best buddy, good old Nick Bradshaw Goose, played by Anthony Edwards, who is rocking a luxurious stash throughout the film. One of the best mustaches of the 1980s, in my opinion. But, despite the excellent mustache, despite being such an excellent pilot, the two of them, they kind of brush shoulders of a lot of other fighter pilots in the movie. And there's a lot of homoerotic tension throughout this entire film, especially with Val Kilmer as Iceman. Now, you have some great action in the film. You have, American jet fighter pilots battling some fucking Ruskies. I love to see it. I don't mind a little American jingoism in my 80s movies. However, this movie is very unintentionally funny. All right? Sometimes it's intentional, but a lot of times it's really unintentional. There is just so much, not, subverse, homoeroticism. No, it's very overt. There's so much overt, unintentionally funny homoeroticism in this film. And every time it pops up, every time Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer are just flirting back and forth, I can't help but laugh. That's the true romance of this film, all right? And that's why it works. That's why it's remained in the pop culture zeitgeist, not as this patriotic American movie, not as this, action jet fighter film. No, as a homoerotic dramedy. For that volleyball scene alone is why it's remained in the pop culture zeitgeist for all these years. It's fantastic. It's a very, very funny film. And you have Kenny Loggins singing Danger Zone, one of the most iconic songs to ever be featured in 80s cinema. They actually brought it back for the Top Gun sequel, which may or may not be on my list. But Top Gun is at number 10. It's a super fun film. You got some goofy performances in it. I love the over-the-top homoeroticism, and yes, you do have some good plane jet fighter action in the film. But it's not my number one, although for a lot of people it might be. At number 9, kind of change up a little bit, I have Flight. Robert Zemeckis' Flight. Also, I would argue his last good film. The last 10 years have not been kind to Bobby Zemeckis. But this movie is really good, where it stars Denzel Washington, who plays this kind of veteran airliner pilot. He's an alcoholic, who miraculously crash lands this plane after it suffers a mechanical failure, and he saves nearly everyone on board the plane. However, despite being hailed a hero initially, there's an investigation into the crash and also investigation into him and his substance abuse, his drug abuse, and his alcoholism. Now, the plane crash happens in the first third of the film, and then the rest of the movie is pretty much about the aftermath of it. But it really goes into not only Denzel Washington's character and his drug abuse and substance abuse problems and like his history with those things, but also kind of goes into airline services themselves and how they, try to protect their pilots, how they try to like not reveal certain information, over time, kind of do this whole cover up and everything. It's really, really fascinating. And Denzel Washington does such a great job. And you have a wonderful supporting cast in the film as well. John Goodman is great. John Goodman has like 3 scenes in this movie, and he's like Denzel Washington's best friend in the film. The one scene where after Denzel just goes on a fucking bender and chugs as much hard liquor and does as much blow and whatever hard, just black tar heroin. He's injecting himself with so much alcohol and so much drugs that he's just like, and he has to present himself, in front of this body, this court hearing, right? And they're like, don't worry, we got John fucking Goodman, all right? He's going to give him a little Cocoa Puff. He's going to wake him right up using drugs, and he'll be right as rain. And somehow, Chad, John Goodman came in there and did just that. I mean, Denzel Washington inevitably kind of fucks it up by revealing that he is an alcoholic and does have a substance abuse problem, and he loves drugs and he loves alcohol. But that one scene alone, fantastic. But yeah, the crash sequence in the movie I think is really good. You have a lot of strong leading and supporting performances in the movie. And it also just shows you, wow, Bobby Zemeckis, he was a good filmmaker once. Like, he is capable of actually working with living, breathing actors and not these lifeless CGI abominations that he, for whatever reason, insists on shoehorning in all of his movies. It was like, remember the good old days, Bobby Zemeckis. And that's what Flight was. It's a great drama and an interesting look into airline services and how they, protect their various people. But at number 8, Chad, number 8, is a little different. This one's a little different. Kind of related to airline services. I have Up in the Air, which is this cool comedy drama film directed by Jason Reitman. Remember when Jason Reitman used to make good movies and now he kind of doesn't do that anymore? It's also written by Reitman, or at least co-written by Reitman. And the story, it centers on this traveling corporate downsizer. Basically a guy that just goes around, is hired by these companies to literally just fire their workers because they don't have the fucking balls to do it themselves. And this person, this downsizer, this professional firer, if you will, is played by George Clooney. And it's really just about his life and how he really just has no home life at all because he's just constantly traveling. And it's an interesting perspective on airline travel, because when it comes to airline travel, I find it fucking miserable. I find it's uncomfortable. It's not fun. It's the last thing. It's one of the forms of travel that I dislike the most. Not because I'm scared of it. It's just like, God, just dealing with all those people inside that metal tube. But for George Clooney's character in the film, that's really all he knows and all he's really comfortable with. And he comes to meet these different people from various walks of life. One character played by Anna Kendrick kind of wants to do what he does, but he kind of starts a bit of a relationship with this character played by Vera Farmiga, and he seems like, through her I can have like a better life, but there's some really crazy things revealed with her character that kind of changes perspective on everything, and him seeking to be like more fulfilled in just doing his job and just the mundane aspects of air travel. It's just really interesting perspective for a plane movie, and I think George Clooney does an absolutely fantastic job throughout the entire film. And moving on to number 7. This one's a hard one. This one's a rough one. Not because it's bad, it's just because it's a really difficult watch. And that is United 93, which is directed by Paul Greengrass. And it pretty much focuses and chronicles the infamous events on board the hijacked flight. It was one of the 4 hijacked planes during September 11th. This particular flight, Flight 93, was allegedly supposed to hit the White House, because he had the other 2 flights hit the Twin Towers, and then the other one hit the Pentagon. Flight 93 was intended to most likely target the White House, and it's due to the intervention of the passengers on board and the crew that stopped it. Eventually, the flight crashed in Pennsylvania before it got to its alleged intended target. Again, this movie doesn't have any big names. I'm sure these actors went on to do other things. I'm sure, and perhaps not. But as someone who I remember some of you guys are young enough where you weren't even born in 2001. You were born after, which is crazy to think about. But I remember 9/11. I remember the day. I think I was in 4th or 5th grade. And I remember being taken out of school because something had happened, and the teachers were all like worried and scared and anxious. It was crazy to see as a kid. Like, why my teachers and these people that, are kind of authority figures and they, teach us all this material and stuff, why they're so anxious, got picked up, brought back home. And I just remember just seeing my parents just literally just standing in front of the television, watching as like the towers fell. And, even as a kid, even though I just didn't have like any, I was picking up on certain things like politics and elections and stuff like that, but not enough to really know. But really 9/11, you got to remember, this changed everything. Society, culture, economies, entertainment. And it's such a profound generational effect, specifically, many generations, but specifically my generation of millennials. And even then I was like, this is something very serious, just because of how all the adults were acting, and just, come to know more and more about over time. And so like when this movie came out, like 9/11, like that was just it was so personal, and it is an incredibly well-crafted movie. I don't even want to call it a thriller, even though it does has those aspects, but it's very well made. It's brutal. All the actors do such a great job. Even just the moments where you have the passengers like calling their families and telling them what they're like about to do, just wanting to say that they love each other and goodbye in case they're not able to, land the plane, which they obviously did not. It crashed. It's a truly harrowing movie, and it's a movie I've only watched once. I've only watched this once in the theater, and it's a hard, like, there's some films that you've seen, for a lot of people, it's, films like Schindler's List, or 12 Years a Slave. And, I would say United 93 is one of those movies. It's incredibly well made, but yeah, it's difficult to sit with, but all the respect to Paul Greengrass and the writers and everyone else that worked on the film. I think they did a wonderful job of capturing those events to the best of their abilities, and also honoring those people that literally made the ultimate sacrifice. It's an incredible picture. But moving on from number 7, change up a little bit, I have Red Eye, Wes Craven's Red Eye, which is one of his more underrated films, also one of his shortest movies. I think this movie's like 85 minutes long. And it stars relatively small cast, bit of a bottle film for the most part. Stars Rachel McAdams, Cillian Murphy, and Brian Cox. And the story follows this hotel manager, played by Rachel McAdams, who is pretty much ensnared in this assassination plot by this kind of terrorist for hire played by Cillian Murphy on this red-eye flight. And it's a really tightly knit bottle film. for the most part. And they eventually do leave the plane. But the chemistry, the back and forth between McAdams and Murphy is great. He is so goddamn sinister in this film. He's having so much fun in this role. And it really shows you that, like, you know, Craven, he not only was he able to create, you know, amazing horror films, but it's like he had a great mind for thrillers as well. And he brings in some of his horror sensibilities to it. And it's one of his movies that I think has gone underappreciated. Matter of fact, I think there's like a longer version that you guys can find. Because initially it went out in the theaters. It did very well critically and commercially. It did well, especially because it came out the same year as Cursed, which a lot of people would say, and I think I would also say is probably Craven's worst movie, although I would not blame him for that because that was taken out of his hands, obviously. But Red Eye just reminds you, it's like, wow, Craven was such an amazing talent. And I think underrated when it came to different genres, certainly different subgenres. It's a movie that I've wanted to revisit for quite some time, and also just to see the chemistry again between McAdams and Murphy. But really, really nice, tight thriller. All killer, no filler, as the kids like to say. And here we go at top 5, chat, top 5, and these movies are just so much fun to me. At number 5, I have Con Air. Put the bunny back in the box. Of course, Con Air is directed by Simon West. Arguably his only good movie. Certainly, I don't think it's controversial to say it's his best film. Let's say that. And you have an all-star cast of people in this film as main characters, secondary characters, and tertiary characters. It's a packed fucking cast. You got John Cusack, right? You got John Malkovich as Cyrus the Virus Grissom, and he is chewing scenery anytime he shows up in this film. I mean, you got Ving Rhames, right, as a criminal. You got Steve Buscemi as a serial killer. You know, you have Danny Trejo in this film. You got fucking Bubba from Forrest Gump talking about shrimp scampi, lemon shrimp, garlic shrimp, you know, hot shrimp, all sorts of shrimp, chap. But it also stars Nicolas Cage. This is during the time when Nicolas Cage was just putting out banger after banger after banger. And a lot of great action films. And also just dramas. Like, the 90s was such a great decade for Nicolas Cage. But you have things like Face Off, of course, and The Rock. But Con Air is just so much fun. As this guy who was honestly wrongfully imprisoned, went to jail for like 10 years after he was like attacked by some goddamn hoodlum, by some jabroni. What's his name from Heat that betrayed the whole group? It's the same guy. He keeps betraying everybody, right? Nicolas Cage with a very unintentionally funny Alabama accent, a ridiculous wig, and it's obviously a wig, but despite how goofy he is, his accent is, his wig is, he sells it. He's able to sell these lines. He's able to completely capture your attention through his sheer Nicolas Cage zany charisma, and you love him by the end of the film. You want him to deliver that little bunny rabbit to his daughter, all right? After they crash land in Las Vegas, you want him to go after Ving Rhames and Cyrus the goddamn virus and defeat them. It's such a fun film. Despite the crazy premise, like the whole idea like this, it doesn't make any sense. It's so stupid on paper. Like, we're going to transport all these prisoners in this massive fucking plane and all the most dangerous criminals in the United States all at once. Terrorists, serial killers, hackers, rapists, murderers across the board, all one place, one time, boom. What could possibly go wrong? Thank God Nicolas Cage was there, because it could have gotten a lot worse. And despite how silly it is, it's just so much fun because it's so earnest. And again, even though you may not know like everyone's name in the film, like the actors, like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, it's this guy. And you've seen them before. And they just give them all something. Dave Chappelle's in the movie, and he's like really fun. It's also funny. Yeah, it's just rewatching it again. I rewatch Con Air every couple of years, and I'm always reminded by like, wow, this is well done. It's perfect 90s action cheese, and it wears this on its sleeves, and it asks you to embrace it. And if you embrace it, it's gonna take on a wild fucking ride in the sky. It's gonna be a great time. But at speaking of comedies, at number 4, I have Airplane, which I think for a lot of people might be their number 1. I totally understand. Which is a disaster comedy film, written by and directed by, or co-written by, the David and Jerry Zucker in their directorial debut, though it's also directed by Jim Abraham, so give him obviously the credit that he deserves. And this film is a parody of the disaster film genre, particularly airplane disaster movies. Such disaster movies like 0 Hour, which this whole film borrows the plot from, which I came to learn, which I thought was really fascinating, including characters and dialogue from that movie. But it also draws a lot of story beats and action beats from the Airport disaster film series, specifically the first Airport film released in 1975. And it's just, again, this is another movie that I watch every couple of years. And it's like I'm watching for the first time because they pack so many jokes into like one single scene. It's not just the funny dialogue that the actors are given, but it's just like stuff in the background or these recurring gags that keep popping up. And it also, not to say that this film, like a lot of people say, like, oh, they give this movie a lot of credit, like this is what started the parody genre. Not really. It was already around long before this one, but similar to something like, I would say, John Carpenter's Halloween, I think it certainly popularized it because it was just such a huge, massive hit that people just started doing a ton of parody movies, again, throughout the 1980s and the 1990s and all the way to the 2000s, until it's kind of like died off now because you just had some really talentless people making parody films. But this is, I think, kind of held up as one of the best ones, one of the great ones, certainly of the 1980s. And it just also, I think it reintroduced audiences to certain actors like Leslie Nielsen, who was a serious actor for most of his career up to that point, you know, doing science fiction films or horror movies, or, I mean, everything from Prom Night to Day of the Animals to Forbidden Planet. The guy's been a ton of stuff over the decades, but I think this introduced him to a new audience. And the way in which he just plays his character like so goddamn straight. And that's what makes so much of what he says so hilarious throughout the film, is like, you know, don't call me Shirley, which everyone, you know, quotes. And kind of reignited his career, you know, which led to so many other, you know, huge successes for him, commercial and critical successes throughout the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s, you know. So it did a lot for not only the parody genre, but also for a lot of actors who had, you know, maybe not have been seen, or maybe not had been pushed into the spotlight as often as they were back when they were younger. It's just a really funny film, and it holds up to this day. But I have my top three, chat. Top three. At number 3, and this won't come as a surprise, I have Air Force One. Get off my goddamn plane. I kind of modified it, but listen, Air Force One is a fantastic political action thriller. Directed by Wolfgang Peterson, and of course starring President Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford is the president that we need right now, okay? Because he's going to be honest with you. He's going to give it to you straight. All right? He's not going to sugarcoat it. He's not going to, you know, smear little lies, you know, over, you know, reality or something like that. He's going to tell you straight because he respects you. And that's what I love about this film. This is Die Hard in an airplane, right? And it does it better than Die Hard 2 ever did. Like, Harrison Ford, as the President of the United States, he has to fight against terrorists being led by Gary Oldman, who want to like install this former Soviet leader in control of Russia in this region in the former USSR. And it's just him trying to save his staff and save his family while dodging all of these goddamn Ruski terrorists and battling Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman, I think, does a fantastic job throughout the entire film as well. His accent is going in and out constantly, but he just sells it through his sheer charisma and menace, and him just doing like really kind of downright dastardly evil shit throughout the entire film. And he had like a really good supporting cast throughout the movie. It's not just Harrison Ford, who I think does a fantastic job throughout the film, and obviously Gary Oldman, but you got Glenn Close, who plays the vice president. She does a really good job. You have Xander Berkeley's really good. William H. Macy. Dean Stockwell's in it. A lot of other recognizable character actors too. Like, the only thing that hasn't aged gracefully about the film is some of the CGI. Some of it's like, it works for the most part. Like the last shot of Air Force One crash is not great. that one doesn't look too good. But Harrison Ford just sells. And this is like post Indiana Jones, but he was doing like a lot of great action thrillers and political thrillers at the time. The Jack Ryan movies. He took over as Jack Ryan from Alec Baldwin after The Hunt for Red October. And so he did stuff like Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger. Funny enough, I think it was Deadpool that brought it up during our watch party, which was super fun, even though despite some technical issues. He kind of looks at this, and I like to look at it too. Like this is the third film in the Harrison Ford, Jack Ryan series where Jack Ryan became the president, because apparently he became the president of the book. So I like to think of that as well. I mean, you could have honestly done it. I think it would have worked. It would have been super fun. But yeah, if you're just in the mood for like a really good Die Hard-esque action thriller, this one will serve you well. It's just such a fun film. It's violent as hell. You got some good deaths in it. Some deaths that fucking matter. Yeah, it's a really, really well put together action thriller. One of my favorites. One of the kind of the essential 90s action movies, in my opinion. And here we go, chat. Top two. Here we go. At number 2, I have Martin Scorsese's The Aviator. I think you can make a really good argument that the 2000s was one of the best decades for Martin Scorsese's career. He made some absolute bangers during this thing, especially in the early 2000s, like Gangs of New York, The Departed. But in between those two movies, he made The Aviator, which is huge epic. It's a huge epic biographical film that focuses on the aviator, inventor, industrialist, entrepreneur Howard Hughes, played masterfully by Leonardo DiCaprio. And it pretty much focuses on, I would say, 2 decades of his life, from like the late 1920s to the late 1940s, where it follows him becoming like a really successful film producer and director, and eventually just an aviation magnate, while also focusing on his various mental health issues, like really going into details about how unstable his OCD was, his obsessive compulsive disorder was, and just exploring a really interesting American of filmmaker and industrialist and pioneer. DiCaprio does a great job in the movie as Howard Hughes. You have a wonderful supporting cast as Cate Blanchett playing Katharine Hepburn, who, of course, was one of Howard Hughes' wives. You also have Kate Beckinsale in the film. She does a great job. Tertiary characters played by Ian Holm, John C. Reilly, Alec Baldwin, Jude Law, Willem Dafoe, Alan Alda. You got a huge cast in this movie. And Scorsese gives them each like a moment in this film. It's a great, you guys know, I have my criticisms over biopics, and listen, certainly this one flubs certain details and doesn't get everything right, but it's just so entertaining throughout, despite being as long as it is, because Howard Hughes is just such a weird, fascinating American figure, and I just thought this is just such an incredible biopic, and I haven't seen it in a few years, and I mean to rewatch it one day. But what he was able to deliver, and also just those aviation scenes, and also going into detail about the aviation industry and airline services and things like that. I think that's also really fascinating, along with focusing on Hughes himself and just how he pioneered air travel and expanded upon it. It's very good movie, one of the best of the 2000s. But at number 1, Chad, I don't think this comes as any surprise. I think a lot of people probably have this at number 1. It's one of the most recent plane movies, aviation films. And that is Top Gun Maverick, of course, directed by Joseph Kosinski. And listen, I'll tell you right now, when it was announced that they were going to do a Top Gun sequel, I was like, why? Why? Top Gun, fun movie. I talked about it before. I enjoyed it. Tom Cruise does a good job. Val Kilmer does a good job. Goose death, affected me, obviously. I got some good action scenes and stuff. But it's a goofy film. It's very unintentionally funny. The overt homoeroticism is hilarious. The volleyball scene. It's like, okay, we're going to do the 21st century version of that. We're going to do the 2020 version of that. I'm like, all right. I ate my fucking words when I saw this film. It is one of the best. I think you can make a really good argument that this might be the best or top 5, top 3 best legacy sequels of all time, where this takes place 30 plus years, nearly 40 years later. And, Maverick, he hasn't really amounted to too much. He's still getting in trouble. And after an experiment with a particular jet fighter is sent back to Top Gun Academy to train a bunch of these would-be pilots to go on this super secret and very dangerous mission. And it delivers in every capacity. I mean, yes, the action scenes are breathtaking. How they shot all that stuff in the planes, in the jet fighters, it's beautiful. It's some of the best action choreography, set pieces, I think, this decade so far in the 2020s. Incredibly well done. But you also just have these really good performances. It's not all about the planes. It's not all about the jet fighters. It's like they just expand on Maverick and his character and what he's gone through and how, despite being the hotshot pilot, it's like, well, look what that's brought him. I mean, he wouldn't be who he is without doing all the things that he's done previously. But you show that he's kind of like a bit of a sad character, a bit miserable, right? It's about everything. And he's trying his best to do right by these kids, these very young people, these young adults trained to be the best, jet fighter pilots possible. And the supporting cast is great. With Miles Teller playing the son of Goose, who's estranged. There's a great plot point in the film where they kind of go into detail how Maverick was kind of supposed to be this kind of father figure, for Goose's son, but due to something that he does before the events of the movie, you come to realize that they're really strained. And it's kind of sad. You have Jennifer Connelly, who does such a great job as excellent chemistry of Tom Cruise in this film. You get John Hamm. I think for a lot of people, this was their kind of first proper introduction to Glenn Powell and what he was able to do as an actor. You have Lewis Pullman in the film. Ed Harris has a brief role. And then they also feature the return of Val Kilmer as Iceman, who, again, for people who don't know, Val Kilmer, the reason why you don't really see him anymore is because he had throat cancer, and that has rendered him unable to speak. And I was very curious when having him come back. I was like, is this going to feel exploitive? And the scene that they have between Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer, between Maverick and Iceman, is beautiful. It pulls on the heartstrings. I just like watching it. And despite finding the relationship so goofy in the original film, right? And how obviously that these two just want to start kissing each other, right? And doing more to each other. They were able to capture 30 years of a friendship within a 5-minute scene. Like, all of it just felt so real and so authentic that I ended up, I think, crying several times throughout that film. But that was one of the scenes I was like, wow, you guys are absolutely nailing this. And it became a huge critical commercial success. It was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, but it was kind of that seminal film. It's going to be looked at as one of the seminal films of the 2020s because it was such a huge surprise, but it does everything right and better than that. Better than what you would expect it to do. Yeah, it's seen in IMAX. Oh my God, yes, all of that. It's a technical masterpiece. But I would also argue it's a very well told story. It's a wonderfully crafted story with great characters who have great relationships. And it's always entertaining, even when they're out of the planes, even when they're out of the fighters and all of that. And that's when you know that you've done something really incredible, where it's like I'm as invested in these people when they're outside of an action scene, right? He did such a great job in this movie, and it deserved all the praise that it got, and it will continue to get, I think, over the years. Yeah, and it was one of my favorite films of 2022. It was this. It was Top Gun Maverick, and it was Everything Everywhere All at Once. Those are my top 2 favorite films. They did incredible stuff. But yeah, Maverick is just so great. And I had as you guys know, I had my misgivings, and I ate a fucking bucket of crow. I ate the entire humble pie on this movie, and I was so happy to have been proven wrong, because it's a wonderful, wonderful film. But those are my top 10 best plane movies of all time. I think I got a good list of films here. All featured in maybe different genres, different subgenres. Everything from Top Gun Maverick to biopics like The Aviator to comedies like Airplane to thrillers like Red Eye, and even to films that cover real world events. I think in a very delicate but well executed way with things like United 93. But what about you guys? I'm very curious. What are your favorite plane movies? What are your top 10 favorite plane movies of all time? What are some ones that I missed that you would encourage me to check out? I know, Passion 57. I will check that movie out one day because I know it's on a lot of people's list. But yeah, please do. Please let me know. What about you, chap? My name is Bob. Call sign Bob. I love that. I love Bob. He's so good. Bob is great. That was great. But what about you, chat? What do you think? What do you think of my list? You think it's thorough? And what would you suggest I see in the future? Speaking of what, you saw it 3 times in the theater. I saw it twice. I think I saw it twice in the theater. It's so good. It's a theater. Listen, I mean, you could still watch it on VOD, and it's still really entertaining. But yeah, seeing it in the fucking theater is like, wow, this is a. And that's the thing. Like this, I should have mentioned this before. Like, because this movie was affected by a pandemic. It was supposed to come out like what, 2020 or something. I think it's supposed to come out in 2020 when the pandemic hit, and then they had to push it. And then I think, who was it? Paramount? I'm trying to remember if it was Paramount that produced it. In any case, the film studio behind this movie, they wanted to put it on VOD, and Tom Cruise was like, no. Like, he fought against that. He said, wait. And eventually they put it out in 2022. And I think it was like, it was either the highest grossing film of 2022 or it was like the second highest grossing film of 2022. I think maybe like an animated movie it maybe surpassed it, but it was up there. It was really big. Really big. For the longest time I thought Executive Decision was Jack Ryan movie. I gotta check out Executive Decision. I love me Kurt Russell. Hamilton, have I seen Sully? I have seen Sully. I thought it was okay. I thought it was fine. This is my example of how a theatrical experience may not be necessary, but it can enhance the movie. Yes, yeah, 100%. Bad Boy, I would add Turbulence as well. I gotta check that out. That trailer looked fucking nuts. It really was a serial killer on board a plane. I would add Turbulence as one of those crazy, over-the-top, unintentionally funny action thrillers. Reloaded as prime crazy movies. I love that. That sounds good. Last time I watched this was on the phone and still loved it on the phone. Yeah, it was Paramount. They wanted it for Paramount Plus. That would have been fucking bonkers. Oh my God. I mean, I'm sure people would have loved it, but it would not have gotten, I think, the same level as, clearly, obviously, as like success had not gone to theaters. Oh man. Memphis Belle's really good. I haven't seen that. Let's see. Was there a reason Alec Baldwin to come back for playing Jack Ryan? I'm sure. I think it was probably like money or something. I'm sure it was money. But I don't know. I really don't know. It's a good question. It worked out with Harrison Ford, though. It's not like Alec Baldwin didn't do a good job as Jack Ryan, but I do like Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan. I think of the Jack Ryans that I've seen, which is not all of them. I haven't seen John Krasinski, that Jack Ryan TV show, which apparently they're making a movie now with him, so good for him. But of the Jack Ryans that I have seen, Harrison Ford's definitely my favorite. I like that one quite a bit. Quite a bit. Yeah. Get off my plane. Thought about, president of the money. He's president again. That's right.